Greetings from the cosmic horrors. The stars are right once again. The great old ones allow us to talk about for 30 plus minutes H.P. Lovecraft, the horror writer is a genre unto himself. I'm your cosmic host, Mark Griffin, executive of Lovecraft Estate on Yagath, joined in by two in the material world. David Guffey, who wants us to be a master scriber because he wants us to subscribe to our podcast, or wants you to subscribe to our podcast. And we have Richard Wilson, who's an associate professor at Miskatonic University. Our guest today is Mike Davis, who lists himself as dad, husband, editor, publisher, podcaster, reader, chief cook, bottle washer at Lovecraft E-zine. Welcome aboard.
Hey, thank you for having me.
All right, first question. What is an E-zine?
I'll need to look this up. No, when I started 10 years ago, my initial thought was, anthologies like Ellen Datlow's Lovecraft Unbound and so forth that were so great that weren't focusing it just on the Cthulhu mythos, but more on the cosmic horror aspect of it, and similar anthologies. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if people could read this kind of thing for free online, same quality, or at least hopefully same kind of quality. And so that's what I did. And so, instead of calling it a magazine, because it wasn't, basically was an online electronic magazine. So I just shortened it to E-zine. So I stopped the E-zine. I have health problems, and it gets all those deadlines get to you after a while. But there are hundreds of free stories at lovecraftezine.com still. And now I'm into more of the book publishing aspect of it, and the podcasting, of course, and a few other things. But it's called the Lovecraft E-zine, so there's no reason to rename it. There's still some E-zine stuff on the website. A lot of great stories, really.
So were these all original material, or did you reprint stuff?
Everything on there is original, I believe, with the exception of The Crevice from Lovecraft Unbound by Dale Bailey and Nathan Ballingrid. And I love that story so much that I approached those guys a few years back and asked them if I could reprint it in the E-zine, and they let me do that. But there may be, out of all those hundreds, there may be one more reprint, but otherwise, they're all original.
Awesome.
They may have been reprinted in later anthologies or something, some of them, but I wouldn't think very many of them. So
mainly their first appearances would be your E-zine.
Sorry?
Mainly their first appearances would be in your E-zine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the takeaway is, if you go there, I think I've got it at the top. I've got under free Lovecraftian fiction, and you can, anyone can peruse all the issues there, starting from 2011 to I think 2016 is when I stopped. And there's a lot of stories to read, and hopefully it got better over the years. I think it did. I'm actually not the proudest of the first issue, to be honest, but I learned as I went.
Gotcha.
Right. We all do that.
Yeah.
And, why did you start doing a podcast?
It's one of those things that it happened to me. My other thought in 2011 was that it'd be nice to have a community. There's nobody in the small town I'm living in that's into cosmic horror or weird fiction or Lovecraftian fiction, that kind of stuff. So I wanted to build a community. I didn't have quite a plan in mind, but then, a year or two later, it was Google Hangout at the time. And I started just, at various times saying to people, hey, you guys want to get online and chat? A lot of times it was like 10 o'clock at night or midnight or whatever. And then it just sort of evolved into, what if I just did this every week? Same thing I'm doing now, just hanging out with these guys that I'm already talking to, guys like Matthew Carpenter, Joe Pulver at the time, Rick Lay, those other people, and then have a guest on sometimes. So that's how it started. It just I didn't really set out to make a podcast, but once I realized I was doing it, I tried to make it better. So
I I think that's kind of where I first sort of became familiar with you and some of the others. Was I was in a couple of those hangouts, and it
right.
seemed like every time I did it, my son was with me, and he would just barge in and interrupt and be noisy. So I eventually just gave up trying to get onto him. But it was a
We
lot
weren't
of
being recorded at the time though, so it was just like a free for all.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. But it was
no,
fun. It was a lot. It was really interesting. I one of the ones that Joe Pulver was in, and it looked like he had some Fantastic Four statues up behind him on his shelves and stuff. And
oh yeah.
I was like, I was so that got me interested in looking into him some for sure. So
Yeah, all kinds of action figures. It was unbelievable. Mostly Marvel. He wasn't perfect.
Uh, Matthew Carpenter, is he the one on Facebook like posts like a Lovecraft book cover a day?
Yeah, yeah, that's the guy. And you know, in the middle 2000s, early to middle 2000s, including up to when I started the E-zine and everything, Matthew Carpenter was kind of the go-to guy. You looked for his reviews on Amazon when a Lovecraftian anthology or novel came out. You know, I don't know if you guys remember that, but it was just, um, he became known for that, and he's very knowledgeable. He's a really good friend now. And I'm glad to have him on the crew. The whole idea was, even when we turned it into a podcast, was to make it just friends hanging out, talking with each other about stuff we liked: cosmic horror, weird fiction, Lovecraftian fiction, horror movies, horror books. And Victor LaVale, I've actually got him recorded. I'm going to use this. He said I could use this. He said to me several times that he's a patron, and he said to me several times that that's his favorite aspect of it. Just he feels like he's hanging out at the bar with us when he listens. I was like, "Oh, when do you listen?" He goes, "Oh, yeah, usually when I'm cleaning the kitchen. I have it on YouTube in my headphones." So
I was listening to that interview you did with him, Victor LaValle, earlier this week, and that was interesting as far as because it felt very informal and relaxed and that kind of thing, and he was just kind of talking about a stream of consciousness versus kind of sit down, this very stodgy interview of answer this question, answer that question, and that was really appealing. I like that aspect of it.
thank you. They're pretty much all that way. So, and I'm glad of it. I'm not. There are other podcasts that do it more formally, and they do it. A lot of them do it very well, but that's just not me. So,
Who was your first guest that you ever had? Your big guest.
oh my gosh, I really don't know. Uh, I don't even know at the time if I considered him like, oh, this is a guest. Been so long ago, but might have been Willem Pugmire, W.H. Pugmire. Um, uh,
Can you
yeah,
tell a little bit about him?
this is like 8 years ago, so long time. That's a lot of podcasts under the bridge.
your podcast and E-zine is the first time I'd ever heard of him. Could you tell us a little bit about him or give us some information? I've read up on him a little bit, but I know, didn't he pass the last few years?
Yeah, he was a really good friend of mine, and all of us, especially me and Pete Rollick and Joe Pulver, and yeah, he was just, he was this just very gay, flamboyant guy. I love that about him. He and Joe, for different reasons, were bigger than life, and Willem has got this sort of mythos of his own set in a place he calls Sesqua Valley. Yeah, anyone who listening who hasn't read W.H. Pugmire, you really should. And his work is very poetic. And I've got at least, oh my gosh, at least half a dozen stories on the Lovecraft E-zine site by him. You could start there. There's a search box on my site on the top right, if memory serves, and you could just go there and type Pugmire and probably find him easily enough. But yeah, very poetic writer.
A story you recommend to first read by him?
No, I really can't, because I would think it would boil down to this. If you want to go with novels or go with short stories. And I've got a whole Pugmire shelf, but it's way over there. But you know what? I'm even dedicated a book to me right now. The title's not coming to me. The Strange Dark One is one that a lot of people like. And that might be a good place to start. If you're not sure if you're going to like him, I'd actually start with my site, because you're not going to spend any money. But if you do, then go from there.
So is Strange Dark One a novel?
I'm sorry?
Is Strange Dark One a novel?
Yes. And okay, I found the one I was thinking of. He co-wrote it with David Barker, The Revenant of Rebecca Pascal. Now I think I know he dedicated it to me because we were really good friends, but I also think he dedicated it to me because he knew it was the kind of story I like. So if I personally was going to say to somebody, start with The Revenant of Rebecca Pascal, it's not because my name's, on the inside cover. It's because it's just the kind of story I like. And, he knew that. So probably why he chose that particular one.
And what's that title again?
The Revenant.
The Revenant of Rebecca Pascal. Pascal, just like Pascal's Wages guy. Revenant is Revenant. And I can't remember if there's a Kindle version. There's not. Oh, and good luck. It's out of print. But you can't have my copy because he wrote me a note in there. So
well,
and then he's got a couple of not cemetery dance books. Who's the publisher that does the really high-end, expensive books? Centipede Press. Centipede Press. Like $100 books. We're talking. He gave me one of those too. That's the only way I can afford these expensive books, is I've bought through friends, and wrote something in there. And he's gone now, and I wouldn't. Somebody offered me $1,000, I wouldn't part with it.
Right.
I miss him. I miss Joe. So I was lucky to know those guys.
Is that I have Willem has some videos on YouTube where he does some criticism, and actually I think reads some Lovecraft stories and some others. So I'd recommend those too. There's some really interesting. I don't think there's a lot of them, but there's at least two that I listened to or watched that were really good. And I can't think of what they were called right now. But
the other thing you can do, and I never thought about it at the time, but for guys like Joe Pulver and guys like W.H. Pugmire, they're still alive in these videos. If you go to YouTube, to my video, the video edition of my podcast on YouTube, just go to YouTube and type in Lovecraft E-zine podcast. And what you could do is you could search the site for, say, Pugmire or Pulver. Actually, if you scroll down, Joe's wife did a whole Joe Pulver playlist. But you could see he was on the podcast at least half a dozen times minimum, and it chokes me up when I see him and Joe on those sometimes, because there they are alive talking, you know. But I never thought about it at the time, how many hundreds of hours of, you know, Joe especially, but, you know, at least dozens of hours on my side of Willem is preserved, and, you know, happened accidentally, and I'm glad it happened. I mean, it just happened. I didn't, you know, you guys are going to die, so let's do this. You know, it just happened, and I'm grateful. We're all going to do that, though, right?
No, let's not. Let's
Earlier.
Yeah, tell us about a little bit of Joe Pulver, a little bit. What was he like? What did he write?
What did he write? Joe was very like horror noir type of writer. You know, and very poetic. And a funny thing about Joe is when you look at some of his books, sometimes even the white space on the page was part of the expression of his art. You know, that he wanted it to, there be a blank here, or this indented, or, you know, so forth and so on. If he was here, he'd describe it far better than that. But that was important to him too. So, you know, I did a Kindle book or two of his that had that. It was infuriating. I don't Kindle. Joe's like, my God, that doesn't look right. I'm like, it's going to look differently on every Kindle, Joe, you know? And so, but, you know, the other thing is I had the privilege of, I didn't know it at the time again, but I've got, like I said, I published books. The very last book published when Joe's alive is called, it's a novella, and I do have a Kindle version of it, and it's very cheap, print or Kindle, and it's called A Long, Dark, Grim Road. And it's got a really beautiful cover by Dave Felton, if you guys know him. He does those charcoal type art. So, in fact, Dave Felton is the guy that, it probably would have happened sooner or later, but the guy you can blame for me being on iTunes, in addition for, if you remember, for a long time I was just on YouTube, right?
right.
So I'm at a convention. I'm at the donut shop with Jeff Thomas, and we're sitting there talking. Dave Felton walks by and he goes, "Hey, Mike." I'm like, "Dave, hey, you want to sit down?" He goes, "No, I gotta go." He goes, "You know, I love your podcast." I said, "Oh, thanks. I love your art." He goes, "You know what you ought to do? I'd love to listen in the car and everything. You ought to make it a just audio podcast of it too." And I was like, "No, Dave, that's a lot of work." And then I thought about it for like a month and did it. And then immediately the audience increased dramatically because people could listen to it on the go, you know. So Dave Felton is to blame for that. Everyone who's been corrupted with the audio version, it comes right down to Dave Felton. So
blame him. And so you publish books as well, you said?
Yeah. Again, if you go to the site, lovecrafteasing.com, like I said, there's at the top, you'll see podcasts at the top left, looking at it now, so I tell everybody correctly. And then Lovecraft E-zine books. If you click on that, then you'll see the books. You can scroll down and click on the covers. The Peasley Papers by Pete Rollick. Autumn Cthulhu. I think you guys might be hopefully familiar with that one. That's an anthology I did several years ago.
Sounds familiar.
And Autumn Cthulhu is an anthology I did about 5 years ago. And I'm flattered everyone keeps asking for a second one, and that is going to happen, but probably not until next year. But Laird Barron's in it, John Langan, Richard Gavin, Joe's in it, Jeffrey Thomas, a lot of writers that I'm sure you guys are familiar with, and it did really well. I'm really proud of it. and I just sort of mixed the idea of and you'll get a better picture of this when you read my short introduction in there, but I just sort of mixed the concept of autumn and cosmic horror. So so there's that one, and then The Endless Fall by Jeff Thomas, Kristen Dearborn, Whispers, which is inspired by H.P. Lovecraft's The Whisperer in Darkness. I reprinted Joe Pulver's first book, Nightmare's Disciple, because he wanted it on Kindle too, and we did a new cover and did a new print edition and everything. It's sort of a Lovecraftian police procedural. The thing about it is, it's a good book, but it's very different from everything else that Joe wrote. He was still finding his voice, and then after that, he became this real poetic, more film. You read Lovecraft's Disciple, and then you read a later Joe book, you'll know exactly what I mean. So yeah, the books and then the free fiction. So is there, and yeah,
I imagine publishing is got to be a heartache sometimes.
it's got to be what?
Heartache.
Yeah, it can be hard, but at least, the thing with I was paying a semi fair rate, I think, as much as I could afford when I was doing the magazine, the E-zine. But with the books, I can pay the authors more, and with the books, I actually get a little of money too, a return on the investment.
Right.
Sometimes they even break even and make some money. So yeah, got a new one that just came out today, by Michael Menace, who nobody seems to have ever heard of, and has written like the best Lovecraftian stories you'll ever read, I think. It's only the Kindle version is up now. It's sort of in process, if you know what I mean. So the Kindle version goes up, and then a few days later, the print version goes up, and then they sort of tie together on Amazon. But it's called Rules for Monsters, and he's got so many stories that this is book one. Michael Menace is Minnis, and of course, Michael and I will make money if you buy the book, and it's also on Kindle Unlimited. But it's like, start with that very first story, Salt Air. It's just, they're all amazing. Most of them are Lovecraftian. A lot of them are Lovecraftian. He's just a very good writer, a very underrated writer. So
Keep an eye out for that.
Yeah.
So what exactly is it about cosmic horror that attracts you so much to it?
I think more or less because I think that's the way the world really is, or the universe really is. I don't think there's a Cthulhu out there, of course, obviously, but the universe doesn't care about us, right? If planet Earth disappeared tomorrow, the Milky Way galaxy would go spinning on just fine. And then there's 400 billion other galaxies out there. Since I was a child, I've always been interested in astronomy. I think there's if you're interested in astronomy and you understand the nature of the universe and everything, then cosmic horror kind of plays a part. I do think that if there are intelligent aliens out there, it's probably best not to meet them. I mean, they're not going to be like 100 years ahead of us. Yeah. They're either going to be way behind us or way ahead of us, and when we build a house, we're not necessarily pissed off at the ants, that ant hills that we crush when we do it, but their lives are over anyway, right? So
right.
And Carl Sagan was sort of the flip side of Lovecraft with that. Carl Sagan was like, there is no God, there's no meaning in the universe, but the universe is so wonderful that that's magic in itself, which I believe. You know, there's so many amazing things about the universe. And Lovecraft was more like, you know, there is no meaning, therefore this depresses me. So
Yeah.
Go to 180 with that.
Remember Stephen Hawking's making a comment about if we need to best not, try to contact aliens because, it'd just be a bad situation for everybody.
yeah, he wasn't for it at all. So, and he was a pretty smart guy.
Yeah. So when did you first discover Lovecraft, or were you always into like scary movies and it evolved into horror fiction, or what? When did all that happen for you?
Not like most people, in their teens. I read so much growing up. I didn't have a TV, but somehow I never stumbled across Lovecraft until I was like in my late teens.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember where, but I read a phrase. I read a quote from one of Lovecraft's stories. I think it's in the Gates of the Silver Key, or I'm not sure, but the line was, "I have seen what lies beneath, and it is not good to see." And I thought, wow, that's a really creepy, beautiful line. Who wrote that? And of course, I had heard the name Lovecraft. I just never looked into him. And after that, I just, devoured all the stories. I also devoured, other cosmic horror that I could find at the time, which there wasn't a lot then. A lot more now, of course. So, yeah, just a simple line that I read somewhere, stumbled into it.
Do you have a favorite story about Lovecraft?
If it's just by Lovecraft alone, I like the music of E-zine. I really, really like, might be my favorite. I'm sorry, my mind's going blank. It's been a long day. The Australia one in the desert.
Yeah.
The guy who loses his
Shadow Out of
gets
Time.
taken over by
Is it Shadow Out of Time?
the Shadow Out of Time. Yeah, thank you. People listening and going, what kind of expert is this guy? No, I have a.
He didn't even know what his favorite story
Yeah.
know what his favorite story is. No, I sort of got foggy memory sometimes due to my chronic health conditions. So you know how sometimes you can't think of a word.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, very much.
It's frustrating. Well, that happens to me like 10 times a day. So yeah, the Shadow Out of Time, I love it. If it's my very favorite is the one that he wrote with blanking again, but The Night Ocean.
Barlow.
Yeah, R.H. Barlow. Yeah, The Night Ocean is, I just think it's very poetic, very beautiful, and if anyone listening hasn't read it, you should. And it's this is a story about this guy who goes on vacation near the ocean in Florida, and he's sort of off by himself, away from town, and he goes for walks, and some strange things happen, and he begins to realize that there's more behind the curtain, that there's actually a curtain and there are things behind it, but it's so brilliantly done that he doesn't know exactly what happened.
Yeah, I love the subtleness of that story.
Yeah.
It's like it could be just like just his imagination, it's like, or he's just misinterpreting some what he's seeing, or there actually is something out there. I love that kind of like a duality of reality and fantasy that's going on in that.
And it's not your typical. It's not a third 3-act story, is it? I mean, you could almost read this story and go, nothing happened.
Yeah, it's
Guy, I'm reading a story about a guy who went for walks, but there's a lot more to it than that, you know. He went for walks on the beach, the end. But yeah, it's very subtle and very beautiful. I love it.
Yeah, that was one of the last stories he worked on.
Yeah, I think that's right.
You have some big name guests on your show, like F. Paul Wilson and Stephen Graham Jones. How do you get in touch with them?
There's friends and friends of friends. Like on my Patreon podcast tomorrow night, I'm gonna have Stuart Onan. He has written several books, a couple of them with Stephen King. He wrote a book that I stumbled across about 14 years ago called The Night Country, which is a very, very autumnal Bradbury-esque book. If you love October, if you love autumn, if you love Halloween, you should read The Night Country. He's got a new limited edition coming out, but you can get it for $2 on Amazon too. The old print, 2004 print. But anyway, so my example with him is that I'm friends with Paul Tremblay. So, and I knew that Paul was friends with Stuart. So I said, would you ask Stuart if I can have his email address? And Paul's like, sure. And Stuart's like, sure. So it kind of happens that way.
So how informal are your interviews? Do you come with a set of questions, or are you just like, just think them up as you're going along when you're talking to them?
I make notes beforehand, partly because of my memory and partly because, just like any normal person, you don't want to forget something. But then I do, other things do come up as I go along, and I don't always get to everything in my notes. And of course I have other panelists that, have questions sometimes. And so yeah, it's very informal. I started one with Paul Tremblay. You guys know his little fascination with pickles. He hates pickles. Paul Tremblay. And he's always got to tell everybody how much he hates pickles. So about a year ago, I had him on, and I don't know if Laird was there or not. I don't think he was, but somebody else was. It might have been Langan. And so I just started it real like I always do, and then I just said it on. And I want to thank my new sponsor for this particular episode, Clausen Dill Pickles, and I just started laughing. He's like, "This interview is over." Then he put his headphones back on, but yeah, pretty informal.
Good.
Which, I think that's what the best compliment I get is people, they'll email and they say, I've been listening for years and I feel like I'm just friends with you guys, and that I just hang out with you guys, every time I listen or every time I watch or whatever. And I love that. So,
yeah.
For all the years you've been doing a podcast, what are some of the things you've learned, the mistakes you wished you avoided and stuff like that?
In the beginning, I wish I would have paid better attention to sound quality, things like that. Another thing I learned as I went, I cringe sometimes if I watch or one from say 2013 or 2014 as opposed to now. They're much better.
Right.
And along the way, I've learned to put links in the show notes, links to the book, the book that we're talking about, the author's website, links to my Patreon. How are people going to know these things if you don't tell them? So, but I think the biggest lesson I learned was sound quality, which makes it so funny that the audience doesn't know this, but I had a sound quality problem tonight. So before we started the show,
we worked through that.
Yeah, we worked through it. But
the crack technology team,
the support desk.
Yeah, that's probably it. And I've never really been into hero worship. So anybody that's ever on the show is just like, they're another person. They're a talented person. And I admire people who are very, very talented, but are also good people. Victor LaValle, Paul Tremblay, they're two very excellent examples of that. There's many more, but just off of recent conversations, there are some really talented authors working today that I would never have on the show, even though it probably would bring me some new viewers, because they're just such jerks, treat their fans like crap, things like that. So it's important to me.
Nicer to us, Mark.
Yeah.
I'm working on it.
So,
Is there any like guests that just wishing you could have on that you haven't been able to?
I asked Ellen if she would email Joe Hill for me.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. And I mean, I could ask Paul, but I asked Ellen, I guess. And she did. And Joe's just like, they're not letting me do anything right now. I'm too swamped, So, I mean, it was a nice response.
Yeah.
He's got his hand in a lot of different media at the moment, it seems.
it sounds like he's got handlers that are telling him
Yeah.
your schedule is full.
Yeah. I don't know anyone in common with Neil Gaiman, but if you talk about a very talented guy who's also very, very nice, now that's a guy I'd like to talk to.
Right.
I love his work too. And of course, who wouldn't want Stephen King on their show? And I'm friends of friends. I think I've probably got 3 friends in common with Stephen King, Paul and several others. But, I think it'll happen someday, but, it's just, you got to wait for the right time for it to happen. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. I'm not going to ask a friend to email Stephen King and say, will you be on my show? That's not right, So, but who wouldn't want to land Stephen King?
Right.
Yeah, that would be the holy grail right there.
I mean, he's arguably the most popular writer ever, except for maybe Shakespeare.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No doubt. James Patterson seems to write an awful lot, but the quality I just debatable.
I don't think he writes an awful lot. I think he writes an awful lot of outlines, maybe.
Yeah,
And
Gotcha.
then someone else fills in the rest.
I think is what he's doing now for his storylines.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know why anyone would do that, but
Hit us, Richard. Come on. I think we got it.
I think we have all the questions we asked. And anything else you want to say before we sign off?
no, just thanks for having me on. And maybe I'm just too busy, but I wasn't aware of the show, and now I am, so I'll listen.
Awesome.
We're still fledgling and all that. So it's like
Well, no, this has been fun. You guys let me know when it's up, and I'll post about it and everything. And
Awesome.
yeah, no, it's just 4 guys sitting around talking about things we love, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
definitely.
we really appreciate you taking the time, Mike. It's great to get to talk to you sort of face to face here.
Yeah, it's been a long time since we talked face to face. Since the very beginning, right?
Right.
Now that you mention, I do remember your kid running in, but it never bothered me.
Oh, that's great. So it was a lot more noticeable than I
That's
thought.
the only impression you
I would never remember it if you hadn't said something.
Yeah.
it's like, oh yeah.
But so how old is this kid now? That was a long time
Oh,
ago.
he's 27 now. So yeah, he's a little bit older.
So he's an 18-year-old kid running in?
Well, it's he's autistic, and it was just one of those things. He gets excited, that kind of.
Oh, I apologize.
Oh no, it's fine. That's fine. I understand.
No, we weren't really a podcast then. We were just sitting around talking. If somebody's dog barked or somebody's kid came in, it didn't matter.
Oh, I loved it, and I was then I went looking for it again, and I thought, oh, I'll get on one of these chats, and I guess you'd gone to the podcast format or doing a different format, so you just watched, you got to watch the video later. So I was like, oh no, I've blown it.
You were excluded. You're excluded now.
Sorry, you guys will have to come on the show then. But no, you can watch them live. You know that.
Yeah.
So if you watch them live Sundays at 6 Eastern, you can do the little commenting thing on the side.
Sounds good.
Make fun of us or whatever you want to do.
Oh yeah. Well, probably not. No.
So yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
So what you guys have Patreons and the video goes to the patrons, or is that what happens?
We're technically kind of a library program.
Okay.
And we have like a kind of our own little Facebook group, and we kind of post a video onto there to the Facebook group.
Oh, that's very cool.
So
I can see that you guys are in a library, and I just feel, I mean, libraries that aren't they just they're just so underrated.
Oh,
I agree.
You can be the poorest person in America, and you can walk in and read fiction, nonfiction, learn, or delve into worlds, and you don't need a penny to do it.
Right.
So.
Well, and to be such a small town, this is a really excellent library. There's a lot of resources here, and a lot of interesting things that you wouldn't even expect to find at a library. Probably some of it thanks to Mark, but
Not all me.
Not all you, but
I get like people pestering me, like request things. And I'm like,
Right.
We gotta have this thing in here.
Yeah,
He says so.
yeah.
Mark's just like fulfilling the requests, right?
Yes.
The facilitator.
Absolutely. It helps.
But where are you guys at, or would you rather not say? Where's the library
Russellville,
at?
Kentucky.
Sorry?
Russellville, Kentucky.
Oh, okay.
We're if you Jesse James robbed one of his first banks here.
Oh, okay.
You've seen the movie Halloween. They make a mention of Charlie Bowles from Russellville. There was a real Charlie Bowles from Russellville that John Carpenter knew, and they did not get along, and so he made him sound like he was a mass murderer, in that movie Halloween. So that's our claim to fame.
And in The Fog, they talk about Russellville Road.
Yeah.
Which is
Oh, they do? That's like one of my favorite horror movies.
Yeah, she mentioned something like The Fog is headed down Russellville Road. Stay away from Russellville Road. So
Right, when she's up in the lighthouse.
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
My friend Kelly Young sent me they did a LP of the music,
Mhm.
and it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just rewatched it maybe Saturday or Sunday, and I was really listening to the music. That's the first time I'd ever paid attention to it, and you're right, it is really good.
Yeah, that's one of them.
Right when that movie starts, there's the Edgar Allan Poe quote, and then there's those piano tones
Mm-hmm.
that are just very mysterious. Carpenter's a good composer.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's his.
And,
He gets a little credit for that. He has some albums out of kind of like of scores to movies I wish I'd made.
yeah, and he's on YouTube too. He's got his albums on YouTube. And Bridget, one of my panelists, she's a musician, composer. Bridget said she's been on one of his in one of his concerts, not in, but in the audience.
Right.
So he's done that too, I guess. I didn't know that until she told me the other day.
I didn't either. I didn't realize he was. I'm assuming he's just doing small venues, not just like touring across the United States.
Yeah, stadium sellout type of thing.
Yeah, he can come on the show if he wants, but I don't have his email.
Right. I think Mark did at one time. Do you? Do you still have it?
Let's just say that he's not exactly the most welcoming of all people.
Okay.
All right, never mind.
I've chosen.
I'll keep admiring him from a distance then.
But his father was a professor of music,
He taught music in Bowling Green, Kentucky.
which is about 25 miles from here. So he was from the area, or he knew the area well. I'm assuming when he was younger.
Yeah, he met a girl in Russellville. He dated her, and her father was Charlie Bowles, who ran the movie theater here. So he would come here, and according to her, He lost his virginity at the Lost River Drive-In here in Russellville, Kentucky. So,
Wow, let's just reveal everything.
Yeah, you just dig
Yeah,
it.
TMI.
yeah.
Well,
But do you remember in the fog where there's like Arkham? There's not just Russellville Road. I didn't even notice that, but there's like Arkham Reef.
yes.
Things like that. Some
Yeah.
Lovecraftian name dropping.
Yep.
Even though it's not a Lovecraftian film, it's a ghost film, but more or less. So ghosts that are surprisingly solid.
Absolutely.
But we don't know the rules, right?
Right.
So you guys obviously live in the same town.
Yes.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Oh, that you're lucky. That's a nice thing. You guys have interests in common, and you're physically in the same town. So that's great.
So when we first started doing the podcast, we all did it, through Zoom because we started to do this during the pandemic.
Yeah,
And so we did
during,
it from
during the plague
home.
years.
Yeah, during the Great Plague.
Yeah.
The Great Plague of 2020.
Yeah.
All the time travelers avoid that year.
Yeah.
They're probably avoiding and most of this one too.
Could be. Could be.
So anyway, thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you.
David, Richard, Mike, I see the stars are no longer right. We must cease all discussion until they align again next month. 30 plus minutes of H with Lovecraft is sponsored by the letter E. This podcast is created in association with LovecraftPod.com and the Logan Speculative Fiction Group with the help from the Logan County Public Library and the Great Old Ones. Special thanks to Katie Tyson for making us sound better than we actually are, and Joshua Dukes for his tomfoolery. Until we meet again, may you avoid the wrath of Princess Cthulhu.